Following the release of the Abominable Snowmen animation in September 2022, the future of Doctor Who animations was uncertain. BBC America was no longer involved, and over on the TV side of things, Disney was looking to become involved in funding for the new series. The fans of these animations were left in limbo. But first, let's flash back to 2014. A simpler time. Before the power of the Daleks, before the Pating, Peter Capaldi was gracing our screen for the first time as the 12th Doctor. Pretty much all surviving classic Doctor Who serials had been released on DVD, and we had already seen animated reconstructions of The Invasion, The Reign of Terror, The Ice Warriors, The Moon Base, and The 10th Planet. Planet 55, the studio behind the Moon Base and the 10th Planet animations, was slated to also animate the Season 4 serial, The Underwater Menace. Episode 2 of The Underwater Menace had been somewhat recently found in December 2011. Ralph Montague had discovered this episode alongside the third episode of Galaxy 4 in the possession of collector Terry Burnett. Alongside episode 3, only half of its episodes were missing, making it a perfect choice for an animation. But all didn't go well behind the scenes. There are many factors that could have led to the eventual postponing and cancellation of this animation in 2015. Budget, creative disagreements. There was plenty of talk around these earlier animations about the time constraints that a lot of the technical teams involved had to stick to. But whatever reason they had to cancel the Underwater Menace animation in 2015 was, at least they didn't go ahead and release a half-finished DVD with a broken reconstruction and little to no special features. Right? Right? Wrong. So that's exactly what we got. In October 2015, The Underwater Menace was released on DVD, and in place of an animation was a questionable telesnap reconstruction. For whatever reason, the team behind this haphazard reconstruction was instructed to make as much of a low-effort, primitive reconstruction as possible. Whereas previously, the Doctor Who restoration team could piece together genuinely watchable reconstructions with the little imagery they had alongside the oftentimes lackluster audio quality, here, there aren't even any title sequences or surviving clips included. But hey, I'm sure they made up for it in special features. So we've got a classic making of documentary, love that, and oh, that's it. I mean, sure, there's a second part of a completely unrelated documentary with 80s Doctor Who actors, but aside from that, there's just a photo gallery and the surviving clips. Who in their right mind thought this was okay to put out? Let's jump further ahead now. BBC America began co-funding these animations with the BBC and a couple of other studios by 2016, but that would come to its end with the 2022 release of The Abominable Snowmen. At that point, behind the scenes, it had already been decided to move forward with individual animations, beginning with The Underwater Menace. Commissioned by Anne-Marie Walsh in May that year, not her first choice, but due to new budgetary restrictions, a necessary one. It would be on the 11th of August 2023 that The Underwater Menace would be officially announced to be releasing, and on the 13th of November that we would finally get our beady eyes on the finished product. Before we look at the animation itself, let's take note of what changed behind the scenes. For this release, compared to BBC Studios' previous release, The Evil of the Daleks, it can be seen that a new team was brought in for compositing, that being Arcane. From what I can tell, compositing had been previously done in-house, which is quite common for the BBC animations, whereas Big Finish, the team behind Fury from the Deep, The Abominable Snowmen, and more, do seem to outsource a lot of their work. Upon this, they also dropped the popular 3D sets and backgrounds from releases like Sharda and The Evil of the Daleks, presumably as a cost-cutting measure. But let's see if that's affected the final result. The Underwater Menace animation clearly continues the style of these releases that we are now familiar with, albeit lacking the popular 3D backgrounds. Walking and actions from the characters have always looked a bit odd and stiff, so nothing new there, but more intricate movement has been done well here and there, such as the Doctor laughing with Zaroff in episode 1 in the temple. Although you can't trick me into thinking anyone was climbing up those cliffs, more so sliding up. This animation really struggles with perspective. Having dropped the more tangible depth seen in previous releases, we are left with distracting uses of forced perspective that look more like comic book panels rather than real imagery. In fact, talking of real imagery, any shading or unique colouring is also missing. The Macra Terror animation did this really well, transforming the original black and white story into a mysterious, dark and menacing tale. But this animation did try and fix that issue by altering the designs of many iconic visual aspects of the story, one of which being the fish people. The fish people! Who are, whether they are praised or not, one of the most memorable visual pieces from this story. Instead, they're now shown as multicolored, well, fish people, I suppose, but a far cry from the original imagery. And further, the costumes worn by the Atlanteans, especially Ara and Ramo, are, for whatever reason, much different to the broadcast versions. Much more colourful, yes, but missing the vibe that I believe the original serial's director, Julia Smith, was going for. A much darker, Stone Agey look at the lost city of Atlantis, and quite a jarring difference if watching the animations alongside the surviving episodes. This story is known for difference, and I, for one, am happy to praise it for that fact. It is fast, unpredictable, and the animation is able to keep up with that. I mean, at the end of the day, there is only so much you can do, with Polly hiding in a temple for a whole episode for her then just to be climbing up a cliff with Jamie for the next one. Issues that arose due to a rushed script and the introduction of Jamie into the TARDIS team, making it pretty overcrowded. But this story hinges on its actors. Patrick Troughton, Catherine Howe, and of course Joseph First gave theatrical and sincere performances that carry this story from one scene to the next, and whilst animation often hides some of that, I'd say those performances still hold true here. For a story that is often dismissed, it is unsurprising to see a further lack of special features even on this newer release, but that is unfortunately the way a lot of these releases are going. In earlier years, an animation of a missing Doctor Who episode was an event. The special features would often include behind the scenes on the creation of the animation, and now all we get is a photo gallery. We have come to expect these animations, but we should not forget the time and effort that are put into them by a number of people in different departments. Thankfully, although we were still not sure at the time, this would not be the end for these animations. Less than a month after the Underwater Menace was released, we got the announcement of the Celestial Toymaker animation, likely to coincide with the Toymaker's return in The Giggle, although this time returning to the controversial 3D animation of 2021's The Web of Fear. I mean, really, who thought doing the TARDIS doors like that was a good idea?